And welcome back to another episode of What's So Funny. I'm Guy McPherson. Our guest this episode is Matt Besser, comedian, actor. Oh, and P.S., he's also one of the co-founders of UCB Theater, Upright Citizens Brigade. But, you know, he's a comedian first. That's where he came from. We talk about that this next hour. We don't talk so much about his acting, but a lot about comedy, because he loves to talk about comedy. But, you know, maybe you've seen him in Comedy Bang Bang on the TV, or Parks and Rec, Modern Family. Oh, he's been in tons of things. Tons of things. Go to his IMDb page. You'll find out. Anyway, we had a good conversation. He was in town a week or two ago at Simon Fraser University downtown, and he recorded his podcast, Improv for Humans, along with the Sunday Service Gang. It was a good show. I don't know if that's available yet as a podcast, but you can go check it out. And the 4 is spelt as the number 4. All right, here is my conversation with Matt Besser. Professor Besser, welcome. Thank you. You're here at the esteemed institution, Simon Fraser University.
Yes.
Glad you took some time out of your lecturing.
Yes.
To talk with me.
I love to talk about comedy for whoever likes to listen to that.
I know you don't like to be introduced as the founder of a founder of UCB Theater in New York. You rather like to think of yourself, you're a comic.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. I don't know how often I've expressed that opinion. I'm not sure where you got that from. Maybe my podcast I said that on. But yeah, that is true. I feel like sometimes I'll get introduced when I'm doing stand-up and someone will go, and next, the founder of the UCB Theater, Matt Besser. And I feel like that's like the principal coming out to do poetry at the talent show.
Yeah.
You know, all right, let's...
Different expectations
let
from the
play
audience.
Saxophone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we never, the way the theater came about wasn't like, let's go open up a theater. It was, hey, we're sick of every other place being a hassle for our sketch show. Let's open up a theater for our sketch show. You know, it wasn't, let's open up, get into the business of comedy theater. So I never think of myself as that.
Even though you are that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to accept that.
I do.
And you know, I say Professor Besser. I know that's one of your rap names.
Yes. Me and Griff argue over that.
Yes, Professor is, so, you know, that's said in fun, but you're also kind of a professor. The way you teach you mold young minds in improvisational comedy.
Even old minds.
Old minds, too. Anyone can take the class.
Yeah, like I wasn't being sarcastic. I really do love talking about comedy. I'm fascinated on the mechanics of it. First time I saw improv in Chicago, beyond being blown away laughing at it, I was blown away in the sense of how does this work, which is a common feeling to seeing good improv. To where I had to go up to the people after the show and say, I think I probably said that. I was like, wait a minute, how'd you guys do that? And that second thing you did, that you've done that before, because that was too seamless. And no, we didn't. Come on. The way he burst into song at that point, you guys all knew what to say. No, we made it up on the spot. No way. Stand-up, there is no mystery to it. You get up, you do it, it works or it doesn't.
Well, there is a little mystery in reverse, I think, in that some people think, oh, they're just making it up, and then they're blown away when they see the same guy or gal do the same act.
Doing stand-up?
Yeah. You get that. People don't know that this is prepared ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because the trick is to make it seem like it's not.
Mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, with stand-up, you just it's just you. It's just what's in your head. It's you expressing yourself the best of your abilities, and they're either laughing or they're not. Next time you go up, you either repeat what you did because it went well, or you try to rephrase it because you believe in it, and it either goes well or it doesn't. You repeat it again, etc. But with improv, there really is a methodology and a system and a way of doing it, because it's not just your brain, it's other people's brains, and you're talking and to each other, you're interacting, and you can't read people's minds. So there is a real math to it in a way. So yeah, it's always fascinated with me as a student and then as a teacher. Yeah.
You're like those flocks of birds that all turn at the same time.
Wait a minute. The flocks of birds. Oh yes.
It's sort of a group think.
Mm-hmm.
One does it maybe a fraction of a second, and everyone reacts to that.
Yeah, I guess in any, like even like in soccer or like hockey or sometimes it can just look like a mess, or sometimes it can look beautiful, and both that mess and when it's beautiful, there's more going on than even unless you play it yourself. You're like, you just have no idea. Like, I'm a huge football fan. I watch it all the time, every Saturday, every Sunday, but I really know nothing about it. Isn't that weird?
How is that possible?
It's weird. It's like I'm not like a super duper fan, but like I couldn't coach a football team. I couldn't really break down a game in any intelligent way.
So you don't criticize the coaching and say they should have done this.
Of course I do.
Of course you do.
Because I'm an idiot. But but it's just weird. There's most people only really know about one thing. You can only know about so much stuff. But comedy is what I focused on. I'm really fascinated about.
Yeah, from a young age.
Yeah.
Right. So how old were you when you saw improv in Chicago?
I'm in my 20s.
Yeah.
Like
because you had
21.
done stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought that a stand-up going to see improv would sit there with his arms crossed and go, oh, this is lame. You know how a lot of stand-ups are.
I'm lucky I didn't see there's short form and there's long form. And I think if I'd seen short form first, because Whose Line wasn't on TV yet, and it wasn't, and I didn't know what improv was the first time I saw it. So I had no preconceptions.
You were going to see comedy.
Well, I was going to see this thing I'd read about. And I'm like, what is all this? I'd heard the word, but I just really didn't know what it was.
Right.
I probably thought it was just another word like sketch. It just meant sketch. It was another way of saying that. But I didn't know exactly what it was. And the first time I saw it, I think it was at Second City after their sketch show, and it wasn't so great. It was like, all right. But then I saw Improv Olympic. I saw Chris Farley. I saw Tim Meadows. This is all the first night. Dave Koechner was there that night.
Were they people that you knew at that point? No,
they weren't known.
So they were
at
just
all.
fantastic.
They were just guys.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand the concept of, as you were saying earlier, group mind and ensemble. And after the show, I like pointed at two guys. I was like, okay, he won the first half and he won the second half. Like, I was looking at it in this very weird competitive sports head, or really stand-up head, because in a stand-up club, you're all about, I got to do better. I got to do better than the next guy. You can't follow me. That's kind of the mentality when you're doing stand-up.
And so how long had you been doing stand-up at this point?
At that point, I guess just a couple of years, because I was pretty much just out of college. But I'd done it a couple of times in college, and then that was my big goal straight out of college, was I'm going to be a stand-up. And this is the middle of that boom, or maybe the end of it. But so I went to Denver for a brief period, Boulder area in Colorado, and then I went to Chicago because they had 1 million stand-up clubs.
Even though it's known mostly for improv.
Yeah. At that point, but like I said, this is before the internet, and I was pretty savvy about comedy. I really don't know how many people really knew the concept of improv comedy. Like, I felt like, what books were around? There wasn't an internet. So where would you hear about it? Where would you see it? Like, I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas, where definitely no place for me to see it. It really wasn't being done outside of Chicago very much.
We're around the same age, and yeah, I mean, we grew up on seeing stand-ups on TV or sketch.
Right. I'd heard of, SCTV.
Yeah.
Of course, Canadians know. And loved that. That was one of my favorite shows. So when I heard of Second City in Chicago, that's why I went to see Second City. I'm like, oh, SCTV, blah, blah, blah. But I had no idea that thing improv had anything to do with SCTV. So that, like I said, I think it just meant sketch to me. What's that?
Did it have anything to do with SCTV?
Maybe not.
I don't know.
I know. I'm sure it was involved. Is that how they wrote? Probably not.
Yeah.
Del Close was involved a little bit. So, but no, it wasn't pure improv by any means.
Yeah. So you eventually just stumbled into stand-up and it took hold, because now, do you do much stand-up?
I've always done it throughout the years just for fun, or at least characters in a stand-up venue was always kind of my thing anyway. So I've never been like a straight ahead stand up anyway. So
So it's kind of like one person sketch, maybe.
it is. It
Yeah.
is. Like Steve Martin and Andy Kaufman were the two guys I was totally into at first. And in my head, I was like right down the middle of those two. I was like, I don't want to be too weird like Andy, but I want to be a little more conceptual than, I just had this whole thing in my head.
Mm.
And I'm sure it just looked like weird performance art to most people more than being funny.
And did it in the first couple of years when you were doing it too? Or did you try to be more traditional?
No, that's when I did it. I was
That
actually
is.
talking to Jimmy Pardo about that the other day, who we both started out in Chicago together. I was like, you didn't like me at first because I was too weird. I used to bring like a toilet up on stage, and like these guys are all doing kind of, really good kind of Seinfeld-esque, more observational,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, which was good. And I'm just trying to be weird. So I'd either do really well or I'd bomb. Was pretty much how it went. It was like either the audience wasn't buying me or they were buying me all the way.
I used to buy all those Steve Martin albums when they came out.
Yeah.
Have you listened to them recently?
Within the last couple of years, maybe not, but in the last 5 years, I think I have, and most of it stands up. I think some stuff's a little too silly for me as an adult,
Yeah.
but in retrospect, but it stands the test of time more than like Lenny Bruce does, for instance.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, no, I was thinking that too. Because I remember playing them for my uncle, just saying, "You're gonna love this," and he would just, "That's dumb."
Andy Kaufman, though, I was just looking at clips of him just this last week, and that totally will always be funny.
Can you remember the first time you saw him?
Yeah.
What was it on?
Well, it was probably Taxi, which I was never I liked that character, but I wasn't head over heels like it was about Mork or anything. But as a stand-up, and when I started to get into comedy like that, at Blockbuster Video, we rented the Catch a Rising Star 10th anniversary special, which I don't even think you can get on DVD, and I can't find on the internet in any way. But Andy Kaufman was on it, and he did this bit, which I don't know if he fooled me the first time or I got it right away, but the bit was basically him going on stage and doing the things that everybody loved, like Latka, which was called The Foreign Man, and Elvis Presley impression. And he's kind of just reeling through them like he's a big star, like, hey, you guys want to get a little Elvis Presley impression? Or, like being a cocky Hollywood star. And Bob Zamuta's in the front row, and he's saying the bits along with him. So he's doing the Foreign Man, he's doing the Elvis, he's doing the bits word for word as Andy's saying them. And Andy's like, excuse me, sir, can you not talk while I'm talking? And the guy's like, what? I'm a big fan. I know all these bits. And Andy's like, I know, but I'm the professional. Can you please shut up? I'm paraphrasing everything, of course. And then Bob's all like, why don't you do some new stuff? Don't you have any new stuff? And Andy's like, yeah, of course I have new stuff. I have new stuff. You don't think I have new stuff? And then Bob kind of turns on him like, you don't have any new stuff. You're just a Hollywood star. You think you're... And he goes, I have new stuff. And he does something. This is all a 20-year-old memory. But he's like, and just starts making weird gibberish noises. Almost like he's trying to come up with a character, but he can't, so his head is like exploding basically, and it's bombing with the audience. And watching, as a teenager on a VHS in a Little Rock, Arkansas home, this moment in a New York club where this comedian's bombing. Like, how do they put a guy bombing on an anniversary special? Like, but I got it. I got the levels like that audience there didn't. They obviously didn't get it because that's why he bombed. So to me, that was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. Like, oh, that guy bombed on purpose,
right,
for the home audience. Like he sacrificed what was going to happen there that night with the live audience for the benefit of me here, the home audience. I was like, that was brilliant.
Right, and that's what really took with you too, that conceptual stuff of just sort of being weird and other levels to it.
Yeah, I
Besides
just loved
the joke.
It was really inspiring to, I think, a whole generation.
Yeah, I first saw him on the Dick Van Dyke had a variety show.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I remember him.
Yeah, what
and
did
then
he do on that?
He did Foreign Man.
Right.
And then from there he did it on Carson, which I saw too. I loved it. And again, the audience is sitting there going, "Oh, he's bombing. This is
Right.
uncomfortable. He's not good." And then he turns it around.
Yeah, and then at some point, the foreign man, and that's before the thing I just described. So at that point, the foreign man had become like hack to him. Like, now people want me to do foreign man. So
Right,
now I'm going to
yeah.
take it even to the next level
Yeah.
where foreign man's the hack thing.
So you're from Little Rock. I don't know much about Arkansas other than the
President
greatest
Clinton.
president of the United States is from there.
Mm-hmm. And
Eh.
the next greatest one,
Who's that?
Hillary.
Oh, and then she'll be the next, you think?
I should hope, yeah.
Yeah. Is that just hometown pride talking?
No, I think she should have been the last one. I think she is I'm not kidding. I think she will be one of the best presidents ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the Razorbacks is the name of the
Yes, that's
the
our
team.
college
College
mascot.
name. What is a Razorback?
It's a boar,
Okay.
a hog.
Are there lots of them running around Little Rock?
Yeah.
Do you know what this?
As many as there are moose running around Vancouver.
Do you know what the name of the Simon Fraser team is?
I do not.
Klansmen.
Oh my goodness. That would not play in the
With not-
South.
with a C. They changed it in the last few years to Klan. Still.
That's better. Wow, that would not play down south.
Do you have an Arkansas accent now?
I can turn it down a little bit. No, I don't. I think I had maybe a little bit before I went to college, and then it got mocked out of me.
Mocked out of you. I, like you, started watching stand-up in my whole life, pretty stand-up oriented. Only recently, I'm starting to love improv. I mean, I always liked it,
Mm-hmm.
but now there's something about the spirit of it that I
Mhm.
really like.
Have you been listening to the Improv for Humans podcast?
Of course. It's fantastic, which you'll be performing tonight.
I will.
Yeah. With
Sunday
Local
service.
Heroes Sunday
Yeah.
service. Do you know anything about them?
Only what I've heard, but I've heard that they're the best.
Oh, who have you heard that from?
Well, the guy who booked me. But no, I've heard that. I've heard that from Paul F. Tompkins.
Yeah, Paul performs with them sometimes. Now, it's interesting. I interviewed Paul not that long ago, and he really hadn't done any improv at that point when I spoke to him. And now he's taken off. He's like half and half.
How long ago was that?
5 years ago,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
he did a bit, but he said he was afraid to start because he was already established,
Mhm.
and he didn't want to, risk being awful at something, even though a lot of his stand-up was improvised.
Mm-hmm. That's the way I feel about guitar. I don't want to be awful at it.
So you play it
I play it, but never
for yourself.
publicly.
Yeah. Unlike Paul, who would just,
He
No.
plays guitar.
no,
but he'll try new things.
he'll try new things. So what about a guy like him? Now, is he just a
What about a
natural
guy
at it?
like him?
Well, he didn't need all the training that a lot of improvisers get. The foundation.
Honestly, I think everybody does need it. And there's different ways to do improv, too.
Yeah.
Like there's doing improv. When I say I think everybody needs it, if you want to perform with other people straight up long form, which is taking a suggestion and just so basically starting out with nothing and with other people improvising and building a half hour, I don't think there are any naturals. I think that would be like saying any more than there's a basketball natural. So you can be Michael Jordan and be the best guy ever, but he didn't have a 3-point shot when he joined the league. He didn't have a fadeaway jumper. He couldn't play defense. Like, you still need to do technique. You still need to know the methodology.
He still had coaches teaching him the fundamentals. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do think that. And there's different kinds of improv and you need some people, like the kind of improv you might do on Curb Your Enthusiasm or on shows like Parks and Rec, on the Third Take, because most of the show's written, but there's certain shows will go, okay, now what do you guys got? And then they'll let you do it. And there's some people who are naturals at knowing where the riff should go. And there's some people who don't get it, and they're funny, but they don't go on the track of where it's already going. So they're not being good ensemble members. So some people are natural like that, and some people aren't. I'd say Paul F. is completely a natural in that way. But as far as just long form, I think everybody needs that. It's too tough not to do it.
Yeah. And you took lessons from Del Close, different theater groups as well.
Yeah, probably too many theater groups to the point where it gave me a headache. It blew my mind. Like I was like, what's going on here? I'm not understanding. Like when I started in the 90s, there were a bunch of different, it was a very experimental time in long form. And I think Del would say the same, that for him, it was his most experimental time, even though he did it for decades. But he was just going hog wild and being really successful and had a lot of enthusiasm. I think that's really where the time when it blew up in Chicago. And then I think that was the seed to other places. But he did some amazing experiments with improv that really influenced a lot of people. But it also could confuse, when there's a lot of experiments going around, it can also be confusing of like, how do we do this when all we're doing is experimenting? Does that make sense?
No.
Take it to the art world. If all you're doing is abstract painting and like everyone's doing abstract and having fun with abstract, and then you realize, wait a minute, can anyone do a fine line drawing? And you realize we're all artists, but wait a minute, can anyone draw a figure drawing anymore? Because no one's been working on that anymore. And so there's a certain part of the craft that's missing at that point. I still don't know if I'm making myself clear. But,
yeah, a little more.
But it's like if it's all experimentation, everything can get a little crazy where the basics are missing.
The foundation.
Like with Del in particular, sometimes I couldn't do a good scene yet, and already he has me working on a crazy long form where we're worried about the format and having a great time with it, but I can't even do the basics of a scene yet. But I don't care because I'm having such a good time. Like we did this form called The Movie. It's a great example where he was like, well, I want to tell a story of the movie in 30 minutes and with all the special effects and everything. And so we were doing all the special effects. We're being really physical and we're having a good time parodying it. But the scene work was awful, and he knew it too. And he was like, and he realized he hadn't taught us how to do scene work yet. So we kind of had to back up and work on just how to find the game of a scene, as we call it in long form. But meanwhile, we're in the middle of this experimentation with all of this fun, different forms he's doing, but still learning how just to walk. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm trying.
So when you study from all these different groups, and presumably you're being told contradicting
Definitely
things. Yeah, I think of it like when we had our son in the hospital, we didn't know anything about babies, and the first nurse comes in and says, this is what you got to do. Okay, great. Then the shift changes. The next nurse tells you something completely different.
Yeah.
And I was going, oh, my God.
Panicking.
Yeah, what do we do? And then a third nurse. And then I came to realize, oh, this bad analogy maybe, but there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
So there's all these ways are right, and you do what works for you.
Yeah, that's what I always say when I teach, because some people will say, but I heard that da-da-da. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say that way's wrong, but that's not what I believe in. That doesn't work for me. But it's not quite a religion either in that way. Like, religion can be a lot more subjective. For instance, I think improv can be a little more objective, where I can prove certain of my methodologies work. I can say, well, what you say I know is said out there, but I believe the opposite, in fact. And here, let's do this exercise, and you tell me how you feel about it.
And they presumably could be doing the same thing in their classes with what you teach.
Yeah, definitely.
So this
but
is
it's all how, like you said, at the end of the day, are you getting on stage and having fun doing improv and entertaining an audience? If you are, then it's working for you, whatever that methodology is.
Right. So when students come to UCB and they're being taught the UCB method, it's not to say that it's the best way, but obviously it is in your mind, because otherwise you wouldn't teach that.
Yeah, I know. When people, it's funny because you're supposed to be humble about things, and you're supposed to be like, But yeah, like you say, it's logical. Like, of course, I think it's the best way.
Otherwise,
you know, we've written a book on it. I've poured my heart into it. How can I think? Yeah, it's just one of many ways. No, I think it's the best way. And like we started this whole interview, I love to talk about the mechanics. I love to talk about why it's the best. I love to analyze all that kind of stuff.
Well, as somebody who doesn't know a lot about improv, would I be able to tell if we took the best person from UCB, the best person from Annoyance, IO, Second City, put them all on stage together, would you guys mesh? Or would I be able to go, oh, these are completely different styles, or would it just look like improv to me?
Depends what kind of players they are, too. Like, if they're truly the best, they're probably people who have really good give and take. Like, if you said the funniest, that might be a different person, too. Because the audience often doesn't, like, the audience, let's go back to our sports analogies. The audience of us, the crowd of a might like the high score more than the point guard who's getting the assist or the guy getting the rebounds. Right. But sometimes the funniest guy isn't the best guy is one. So if it's the best in the sense that they're really good listeners, really good at give and take, they're probably going to be able to put aside whatever their improv philosophy is and still be able to put on a pretty great show. I'd still put a tight ensemble at my theater against any all-star team that you're talking about.
Because they've worked together, they're all on the same page.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's always that way in sports too, isn't it? Like you'd always say, I'll put the champion of the league up against the all-star team any day.
Yeah. Chemistry.
Yeah.
So what are the differences? Are they just subtle between the various schools of improv?
Some are subtle, and some are like almost opposites.
Because the foundations are the same in improv, one would assume.
Yeah, but even yes and can mean, like one of our big things is people who talk about improv in very general ways go, yeah, it's all about yes and. And to us, that's okay. That's a very simplistic way of putting it. And we say, if really you're going to boil it down to two words, it should be if then. To us, if then is what takes you through a comedy sketch. If this thing is true, then what else is true? Those are the words that take you through. Yes and is more the words that start a scene, that put the who, what, where of the scene together. Let's yes and together until we get an unusual thing. Boing, unusual thing. Once this unusual thing is true, if this unusual thing is true, then what else is true? I'm no longer yes anding, really. It's no longer about yes and. And we think that people have put so much on those words of yes and that they take them too literally and they won't say the word no, and they say yes to any improv situation that's presented to them, and they don't ground their character, and they act in a way that a real person in the real world wouldn't act. And therefore, in our minds, in our opinion, that takes away from the reality of the scene, and it's too crazy and wacky, and it's not the kind of improv we enjoy. So we think taking in short, we think taking yes and too far ruins a scene.
So if somebody gives in your opinion, maybe in an objective opinion, a bad suggestion, you shouldn't just yes and that. But
well, hold on, I haven't said anything about a bad suggestion.
Haven't you? Okay.
So,
but what about saying no? What about
when you say suggestion? Suggest what we call the word from the audience.
Oh, sorry. I mean
initiation.
There you go.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't know what a bad initiation would be. It's more the reaction to the initiation is bad. The simplest thing being, hey, I'm going to jump. You know, this is the classic. I'm going to jump off the building. Okay, see you later. Okay, in the real life, you would never say that to a person for a billion reasons.
And that would be yes-anding it.
Yeah, I'm yes-anding. Yes, and okay, goodbye.
Have a good trip. Yeah.
And now the scene's over. They're dead. I didn't act in a real way. And that actor didn't want me to say yes. They wanted me to stop them. They wanted us to have a conversation on the roof. See what I mean?
Yeah.
But some people take yes and too literally, and they're like, yes to every... That was an extreme example, but to me, you'll see it in a lot of bad improv. is people acting a little too wacky, a little too willing to go with the crazy versus not saying no to it, but just interacting with it in a real way. Even the most absurd thing, you can interact in a real way. That's how most movies are. Most comedy movies, you have the funny people are the stars, and everyone else is kind of grounded around them and reacting to them. If they were all wacky too, you as an audience member, you'd go like, "This is just some wacky universe. I don't believe in it.
Yeah.
I don't care about the characters." I think you see what I'm saying.
This is the respecting the initiation you talk about.
Grounding it, just being real, just reacting real. That's what we call playing at the top of your intelligence. That's another phrase that gets said in different improv schools, but I think means different things. And it doesn't have anything to do with saying smart, esoteric things. It has to do with acting like a real person. Act the way you would act. Act the top of your intelligence. When I'm a teacher, half of my notes are freeze. Is that how you would act? No, I think I would say this. Okay, unfreeze, say that. And it grounds the scene, and it's suddenly funnier.
What if you are a chicken? I mean, not afraid, but just on stage,
Well, chickens have their own reality. And we're not going to say, well, chickens don't talk, so there can't be a scene. It's like, well, all right. We're going to give it in this world, they talk, or in their language, we can hear them. But, and there's always the absurd thing, but in our world, there's only one absurd thing per scene, not 20 absurd things or even 2 absurd things. We want there to be the one, and that's what we call the game. There's just the one game. What's the game? How do we heighten and explore it? Heighten and explore it. Heighten is making it crazier and crazier. Exploring is what we call justifying. That's putting the intelligent logic behind the absurdity. So we don't just do a good UCB scene is a scene that it's crazy and fun, but there's some logic that makes the craziness not just seem silly, but somehow grounded in the real world. Grounded back to truth. Truth is comedy. That's also another common phrase. What does that mean? Truth is comedy. Well, if it doesn't come to truth, if it doesn't somehow ground itself in truth, it's not. It's wacky. It's silly. It's not what we like.
And so that's one difference. But are all the other schools teaching the yes and? Right? Because they must all be different in their own ways too.
Yeah, definitely.
And not that you would know, I guess, but you have been taught these different methods.
I know when I was in Chicago, like that phrase I was just talking about, I could go from class to class and the teacher would say, play at the top of your intelligence, and they could mean completely different things. So if I heard that from 3 different teachers at 3 different schools, and then it's time for my group to get together and play, and we're like, all right, we should have played at the top of our intelligence in that last scene. Well, what do you mean? Blah, 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 blah. And now we're having an argument about what we even mean by this phrase. That's one of the reasons we put out our book was, for our curriculum, for our school, let's make it very clear what we mean by every single phrase. And if everybody's on the same page, there has to be some benefit to that. Like if you want play at the top of your intelligence to mean something else in your school, that's fine with us. But we're going to make sure everyone at our school is on the same page so we can have better conversations about comedy and get to the next step.
Should be a rule in life, too. I think so many arguments, people stopped and go, wait, what do you mean by this word?
Semantics, yeah.
Yeah. So you got together with 3 others and formed UCB as a place just to perform. And presumably the other 3 of you studied at different places along the way?
Sort of.
You all
I think we all had our epiphany as the improv world was kind of having an epiphany with Del Close in the 90s in Chicago. Like, I had never done improv, period. Ian Roberts had done it, had done short form in Milwaukee. Amy had done her college group, probably did short form too. Walsh had grown up in Chicago, seeing Second City. So we all came from a little different spots.
But then you all got on the same page about what you want out of a theater company and what kind of improv you want shown there.
Yeah, and that came with time and us finding our own voice, too.
Right.
It's not like we knew right away either. And also, at some point, we were doing it, I think, before we could probably put it into words. I think we had to get perspective on it. It wasn't really something I was thinking about on the way or planning on. Eventually, we'll write a book on this, you know what I mean? So But eventually it became easy. We're like, okay, we're definitely all on the same page of what we're doing. Let's put into words what that is. And even when we wrote this book, it took years because it is weird putting comedy theory into words and going, okay, what do we mean by this? But we ended up agreeing on everything. It's not like it all seemed to make sense to all of us at the end, so we were pretty happy with it.
And it's just exploded. You have 4 theaters now?
Yeah, we just opened up our second one in Los Angeles.
Yeah, any plans to expand even more than that?
As far as United States go, it seems like if you're a comedian and you're going to be a professional, you go to LA or New York.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's where we should be.
And Chicago, they have too many?
They do. We've always kind of not even thought about it out of respect. But now I hear they have 12 theaters now, which seems crazy for any city.
Vancouver, I know, has 3 schools of improv.
Yeah, that's a good number, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I feel like 12 is like, that reminds me of the stand-up boom before the bust.
Yeah. So when you go to work tonight on your Improv for Humans podcast with the Sunday service from here in Vancouver, I mean, they all work together, so they know they've worked together for years, and it's that chemistry you're talking about. You're going to be the odd fish, but
I am.
But you are the host, and you will stir the drink. Will it be easy to mesh in? Have you done this before with other troops that you didn't know?
You know what? I haven't.
Oh, this
I haven't.
will be fun.
This will be an experiment. I've obviously performed with people that I haven't performed with before, but they've always been, as I think you just put it, the minority. They've been the guest with other people that I have. But also, you being a big-time listener to Improv for Humans, you know that I do have groups on that are already, most of the time it's not a pre-formed group. It's people that do just shows around the theater who mix it up. But sometimes I'll have a pre-formed group come on, and I try to go with their flow. Like they have their own vibe. So, but we're all UCB, so we're all playing the game for sure. But not every group is the same. Not every group has the same style or even the same, definitely not the same format and even philosophy, really.
Yes, I know.
So in other words, I will try to go. I will feel them out and go with their flow. I don't think they'll be. Supposedly, they've listened to my podcast and are fans on some level. So I hope they have a similar philosophy enough.
I'm sure they will.
I think they will.
Will you give them notes at the end?
Definitely not.
That's part of the improv, isn't it? You guys do that after
when
every
you're
show?
beginning? No, we don't do it at all at this stage. Well, everyone I'm doing it with, I consider a peer. So to give a peer note unasked for is kind of annoying. I only do that as a coach of a team or a director.
Right. I've always thought that with stand-up, they can get up there and get stuff off their chest and give their opinions and be funny, hopefully. Do you get that same opportunity in improv, other than in just little comments here and there?
Well, you don't listen to my podcast, but if you did, you would know that I actually do almost too much at this point. This is an interesting topic you bring up because recently I have shared my opinion so much that I might have lost listeners to that effect. I had an opinion on
while improvising.
Well, no, we talk before the improv.
Yes.
And I don't know if Monica Lewinsky is still a reference.
Yeah.
North of the border.
Sure.
We brought up Clinton earlier. But I have very strong opinions on her, and a lot of my listeners did not agree with them. And a lot of them did, so it was very polarizing. But it depends. It depends what your form is. Like if your form is just taking a word and launching into scenes, no, the audience probably isn't going to hear in a direct way, your soul. Like, let's point to Mark Maron as being in stand-up an extreme version of bearing your soul in your stand-up, right? So that is the opposite end. The opposite end of that spectrum is a sketch show where everyone's a character and not talking to the audience, and there's a fourth wall. So those are like both funny, but completely opposite ends of the bearing your soul spectrum. But I would argue many sketches, many improv, the performers are bearing their soul, but they're doing it in a more abstract way that maybe the audience doesn't know. But the same way the lyrics in a song, a singer is bearing their soul. The listener may not know exactly, understand the lyrics or know the story behind it, but that doesn't mean they're not bearing their soul.
It's more subtle, is what you're saying.
Yeah, or it's just abstract. Like I could go up as a stand-up and say, hey, what do you think of these new prostitution laws that they're making here in Canada? And then I have some observation on that. That would be like if you had laws for, and then I go to some other level. I got to define the joke now, but the sketch show just jumps right to the analogy, whereas the stand-up kind of talks to you about the thing, and then makes the analogy, and then plays out the analogy. The sketch just starts with the analogy, and you either get it or you don't. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're both kind of getting to the same comedy, just in different ways.
I totally listened to your show, and I was just using that as a stepping off point for you. I knew that you wanted to talk about it, but I meant more in the performing of it, more so than in the preamble to it.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess, like I said, in an abstract way.
Yeah.
But when you do it the way we do it with, I guess the preamble is still part of the performance because we're trying to be funny in the way we're talking about it and having opinions on it. And when you hear that part of it, see that part of the sausage being made, I guess you do understand the symbolism of the scene more, or get where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe that's a benefit to improv that leads into the sketch, like this kind of show does.
And your podcast, for those who haven't listened yet, is basically Ask Cat.
Yeah.
Which explains, everyone knows what that is just from the term Ask Cat with 4 S's.
Yeah, that's our improv show we start out with in New York, and it just simply is we get a suggestion from the audience. We have a monologist. That monologist mulls the word over, thinks of a story, and then we do scenes based on that story. Mm-hmm. In Improv for Humans, it's pretty much the same thing, but instead of just one monologist, it's 4, or tonight, 5 of us talking it over and launching into a scene.
I saw you perform it here in the Vancouver Comedy Fest.
Right.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, about 3 years ago.
Tim Meadows was there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I was blown away by him because I'd only seen him on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And I always thought he was the weak link.
Mm.
And you realize when you see somebody perform live, wow, this is how they get to be on a show like that. They are very good. Even though
I don't agree with you on the weak link thing. But
is that because you know him, though?
He's one of my good friends.
Yeah.
But I also think he was very funny on SNL.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, ladies, man, come on. Are you kidding
Sorry?
me? Ladies, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a very strong improviser.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of Improv for Humans. Is really funny on it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can't always, whether it's SNL or sitcoms, you can't always blame these actors and sketch performers for what's being given to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Or how much freedom they're
being
given.
Even I always say this about stand-up. You see somebody on TV, you may think they're average or below average, and then you go see them live and you're blown away.
Oh, yeah.
Could be vice versa, too.
Oh, it's so difficult to do a 4-minute stand-up set. That is such its own skill.
Mm-hmm. You guys were written up in the New York Times. I know you weren't happy with that. It was about not paying your performers. Mm-hmm. I was wondering about the fallout from that. Was there any?
What you're referring to is there was a stand-up who was a club stand-up, in that there's certain stand-ups who go club to club and they make their money doing that, and they're also road comedians sometimes. And those kind of performers envision a career and a profession making their money on the stage, and they're in a different world than improv and sketch people, and really a lot of stand-ups these days, the alternative stand-up scene, if you want to call it that. And they're two different worlds, and we had this guy in our club, and he did a gig, and he felt like he shouldn't have been paid, but we don't pay anybody, and we never have, and we didn't tell them that we were going to. And really, if you really get into it, the guy likes to do Facebook rants on everything every day and likes to stir shit up and had a lot of fun doing that. And I don't think he really was that upset, but it became a New York Times article, like you said, which was definitely annoying. But we do pay our comedians. We pay them in the many services we do for them. And most of our shows are either free or $5, so the theater doesn't really make any money at all. And if we were to pay everybody, we'd have to raise all the prices, and it would become not what it is now, which is a comedy collective. It would become like Second City or the Groundlings, which has a very small ensemble. If you're going to pay comedians, you can't have 300 to 400 comedians on stage like we do every week. You have to have 20 to 30 comedians on stage like Second City, the Groundlings, places that do pay their performers. You have to have them there every night. You have to have them do multiple shows, but that's not our structure. We're like, we want to have different shows. We want to have different people. We don't want to have the same people. So it's a different system.
Yeah, well, and what were they even talking about? Were they talking about $5, $20?
In New York, in particular, when you go around, you get you get the $5 handshake, and it's just the thing. Or it depends the club and how big you are, basically. And this was one of those guys who's like, "Hey, what's the big deal?" And we're like, "Well, the big deal is we just don't do that. It's not a big deal. Sure, we could reach in and give you $5 from the cash register, but that's just not our philosophy. And it's a take it or leave it philosophy. It's like, if you don't like it, then just don't perform here." And that guy really didn't perform here. He's probably been on our stage 4 or 5 times.
Has he been since?
Yeah, he has.
Oh, he has, actually.
Yeah, as a matter of fact. So, no, there's no fallout. It was overblown. But it is interesting, the differences between those worlds. But I think the paradigm has shifted at this point, especially with the internet, that there's so few people who have a realistic expectation of making a profession of doing comedy live unless they plan on being on the road all the time.
Was the analogy made to the Mitzi Shore situation in the 70s with the comics?
but it was a poor analogy because those comedians all were her comedians and all came from the club, whereas this guy had nothing to do with us.
But it applies to those that do have something to do with you because they're not being paid.
That is, but they get the system, they get what's going on there, and they get what we do for their career. We're basically like managers and agents for them without taking a fee when they get success. We're working for them all day long.
It was an interesting article to me, and the comments, voluminous comments, were very interesting because I'm a guy, I read something, I go, that's a great point, he's right. Then I read the opposite opinion. Yeah, yes. I then go that way. So I see both sides of the issues. But bottom line, I think, is no one's forcing them. Yeah. No one's forcing anyone to get up on stage. And it's not a shock to them, if they come to you and go, "Where's my check?"
It's like, it's a comedy collective. So if you either get that or you don't get it, it's like, and I think through this whole interview, I've pointed out differences between stand-up and improv, and I've done both, so I know both, and I love both, but they're definitely two different worlds and two different, literally, mentalities. And some people get that and know and are cool with it and mesh with it, and some people don't. But I think that's a small minority, and it's people who are like I said, back in a paradigm of comedy from the 90s, in my mind.
I mean, well,
like if $5 handshakes is really what's going to get you, like, to me, that's very short-sighted.
But you guys are the top dogs now, really.
In improv, what do you mean?
Well, you just sort of seem to, the people that have come from UCB, and UCB in our minds, anyone who pays attention to comedy, it's right up there.
Well, like I said, we're not just a stage. I hope your listeners don't think I'm being braggy, but you're asking me. But we're not just a stage for people to go up at 7:00 at night and then they're done. We are working for them all day long. There is something going on during the day, and I don't think that's really happening at most places. Like, we really are getting work for our performers, and we're doing more. When we started doing improv and sketch, all a theater was, I would have to rent my spot, so I'd have to pay $500 for have a techie or have to pay a techie and have to pay for rehearsals and have no artistic director help me out with the show. It was just us in the wild, So now we're providing a whole system for people. You don't have to rent out anything. So if no one shows up to your show, you don't have to worry about it. Tech's all there. PR's all there. You're going to get butts in the seats. That's why we keep it cheap. So they don't have to worry about anything. And they can just get on to what they really want to do, is make comedy and hone their skills for where they really will make money: television, films, and the internet.
Yeah, I wonder what percentage
What's that?
on. What's the percentage of people that can go on to a career in it? It's very small, I would imagine. But that's the dream.
But I think these days it's bigger and bigger. It depends what you think a career is and what success is, I guess. To me, if you're making money doing what you love, that's a career. And I think there's more opportunities now than ever, just because you don't need anyone to say yes and to you. You can, if you believe in yourself, you can make your comedy album, your whatever, and put it on the internet and have people buy it. And if it's good enough, they will come. I know that's very simplistic, but it is more of reality than it was when we started in the 90s.
And you don't, I think you could put bums in seats even if you raised the price, because you're so well known now.
Right. But if you look at even our houses since we opened up this second theater, we were completely sold out pretty much every night, every show before we opened our second theater. Now I'd say a lot of our shows are about half filled. So now some people are seeing the reality of that, like, ooh, I do like it better when there's more people in the seats. So I don't know if that's necessarily true, that if we doubled the prices, we would fill all the seats. I think that is one of the reasons that the seats are filled, is because they are free and cheap, because people in their 20s just don't have money. And that's what I remember.
Nobody old comes out to your shows?
They do, but
we
not
get tired.
Numbers.
We get tired easily.
Yeah. Not past that 10 o'clock show.
But also, do you find that as the top dog, or one of the top dogs that you guys are now, that, well, with that comes the pot shots and the criticism. People want to take you down a bit. You're not the up-and-coming guys that everyone's trumpeting.
You, as far as that goes, that relates more to what we were talking about earlier with the philosophy of improv, because that incident you're talking about with the money was really just one thing in New York like a couple of years ago at this point. But the philosophy thing seems to be an ongoing hilarious topic of conversation to me, of how contentious it can get. Like,
you mean your style, the philosophy of improv?
How angry people will get. It's hilarious. And I love it. It's like religion, how passionate people get about it. And not just ours is better, but theirs has too many rules and is fascist, just getting really opinionated.
But yeah, they're all like that, though, in their own way.
What's that?
The rules, the improv schools of how to do things.
Yeah. I guess what I'm talking about, it's funny to me that people can get mad about those kind of things. It's one thing to have intellectual debate. It's another thing to actually go to war. And I would say, I have no idea about Vancouver, but I know in many cities there's big time competition between theaters, like either at our theater or you're at their theater. It's not that way in LA at all. I don't think.
It used to be like that here, and now they work with each other a lot. Anyway, more so.
But I don't mind it. I like competition. I've made a lot of sports references. So I don't mind that, but I think it's funny. I never would have imagined that when I started it.
Yeah, well, like we were saying, it's your way because you think it's the best way.
Yeah. But everyone should think their
everyone.
The best
That's
way.
right. It's when we're talking about opinions on anything. Well, I think this because obviously I think I'm right.
Yeah,
I may not be.
And when people don't act that way, I feel like you're just being a phony. You think that's the best way.
Yeah, you can't really say it. That's right. You can't go around. This is the best way.
Yeah, you have to couch everything.
I heard you once had a chair thrown at you. You
Mhm.
made fun of the Pope. So I guess you did get your opinions out there. Does that ever happen
See?
Yeah. Did that
I would
happen?
say most characters I do, for instance, on Comedy Bang Bang, I'm getting an opinion out there.
Right.
And I don't know. You know what? I'd say half of them, but I don't know. Yeah, you can, of course, you can get your opinion out with a character, especially when you're embodying the person that you're criticizing.
And somebody just got really angry?
Yeah. He got really mad, and it was an unexpected place. I thought it would be something about abortion that would make a chair come, but it was something. I was comparing. You know what? I don't want to make your listeners mad. I'm not going to say what I was doing. Why should I turn off 10% of your listeners by stating my dumb opinion?
Yeah, I was an altar boy. So.
Oh, see.
But has that happened in stand-up, or your stand-up was more of the absurd?
Well, that's the kind of thing I did do in my stand-up characters like the Pope. That was an extreme example, having a little chair thrown at me. I have had some angry discussions as I exit the theater or the comedy club, though. I'm sure a lot of stand-ups have.
And do you get that too with students?
What do you mean?
Well, sometimes, like Del Close had to be a bit of a hard ass, and you must have to be sometimes with a student, or at least they take it that way, because they're all sensitive artists.
With Del, you definitely knew what you were getting into. So if anybody was sensitive about that, I don't, wham is how I feel about that. I guess I feel the same way about me. It's one thing for a teacher to be mean. That's unacceptable. But for someone I expect at a college level of education that you want your professor, your teacher, to be as honest with you as possible. So when people can't take a note because it hurts their feelings, that's too bad.
Yeah, because you must have had your feelings hurt as a young improviser.
Feelings hurt, I guess. I'd like to not think of it that way. I definitely was embarrassed. Is that feelings hurt?
After the fact?
No, embarrassed, blushing on stage, Del in particular.
Oh, as he stops the proceedings and says something.
Yeah, embarrassed to the point where I'm like, and embarrassed because I know he's right. Like, oh boy, he's right. And I can't believe I was doing that. But I didn't go, why did Del do that to me?
Yeah. I would say that mindset that you have is probably makes for a better improviser, somebody willing to learn, someone to realize that, they have improvements to make instead of getting their back up.
Yeah. Work on that fadeaway.
I was just, thank you for another sports analogy. Just reading in The Peak, the student newspaper of Simon Fraser University, that professors get cyberbullied. And it said some faculty members, the negative impact is difficulty sleeping, depression, anxiety, and fear of the student. Because they have to, maybe they're not a good professor, maybe they are, and it's perceived as not to be by the students. And so they get online and they talk trash.
But where's the professor going to be seeing that?
I don't know. But I mean, so look at you, Professor Besser. You must see stuff online. Do people?
Yeah, but it's not about being. Well, one, I don't really teach classes anymore.
Okay.
But me and every other comedian, I was on the show At Midnight on Comedy Central this week, and I have not stopped getting stuff about that.
Well,
I suppose positive and negative, but you just get used to it. And if you're gonna appreciate and love to hear the compliments, you got to suffer through the guys saying you're not funny or you're offensive or you're an idiot or whatever.
It's all part of the job.
And I'm not saying I do it well. I get frustrated by it too.
Now you have a new baby.
I do.
Welcome to the Old Dads Club.
Thank you.
And because I know I love your website, by the way, because there's just so much on there. And you do so many different things. Are you able to still be so widespread in your?
No, I'm not.
No.
She's only 16 months, but I definitely my stand-up in particular has gone out the door. Like I used to do AskCat at least twice a week. So now it's down to just about doing my podcast, doing AskCat every once in a while. And then my, the different professional leads that I'm working on.
Right. So you've grown to resent your daughter already.
No, she's so much fun. I don't
Yeah.
care.
Yes, that's the way it is, isn't
Yeah.
it? Well, congratulations on her
Thank you.
and your... the last thing I wanted to say. You have all these lists on your website. Another thing I love about it.
Yeah.
Because the older I get, the more out of tune I am with good bands.
Music, right?
Yeah. And I have in the past written to various people that I know emails saying,
Say recommend.
recommend me some stuff. And I've got some great recommendations
Yeah.
and some lousy ones, but I check them all out. So we just need to go to your website,
Yeah.
which is...
MattBesser.com.
There
But
you go.
on that, in the blog section, I should just call it the music opinion section.
Yeah.
But I do my top 5 picks of every month and my album of the year. I'm going to give the album of the year this year to Sun Kill Moon, Benji. I highly recommend it to everyone. Unbelievable.
What's the name of the group?
It's a guy, really. The name of the group is Sun Kill Moon, though.
Okay.
And his new album is Benji. But just amazing. I've had a lot of singer-songwriters on Improv for Humans, actually, too. But I just like these guys that you really understand the lyrics and they tell these beautiful stories.
Because you have the best musical taste
Yeah, in the world.
in the world. And you also love making lists. So you
Mhm.
have sad songs
Yeah, I
and
do.
then the top songs.
Yeah.
Who's the greatest Canadian band of all time?
I'll tell you, maybe my favorite band, period, is a current Canadian band.
Who?
The Weaker Thans
Oh,
from
yeah.
Winnipeg.
Wow.
But I've seen them a couple of times. John K. Sampson is their lead singer, also does solo work, but they were my favorite band.
Scott Ackerman says there are no good bands from Canada.
Loverboy,
and
The
that,
Romantics.
those are probably his...
Here's one for your listeners our age. Teenage Head.
Oh, I don't know them.
You don't know them?
Canadian?
Yeah. Dude, that's original. That's Ramones era punk rock, Canadian punk rock.
Wow.
DOA.
Yeah, I know them.
You guys
Is that
got
it?
Neil Young. That's all you need.
Yeah, but he moved away. Well, Matt, thank you very much. Talking comedy and music.
All right.
And have fun tonight. I'm going to go up there and listen to you and see what your opinions are.
Okay, guys. I hope to hear. Hope you can hear my Improv for Humans sometime. It's on iTunes.
Do you listen to a lot of podcasts?
Yeah, I do. Not like necessarily weekly, but yeah, I'll sample them out when I hear about a good one.
Yeah. I enjoyed you in the Earwolf Challenge, by the way.
Oh yeah, classic.
That was fun. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye.
All right, the Weaker Thans. I'm downloading them now on Matt Besser's recommendation. And he should know because he has the best musical taste of anyone in the world. One thing I forgot to mention with Matt is that he's related to the grandson or grandnephew, I'm not sure, of Joe Besser, who is with the Three Stooges. That would have been fun to talk about. What was I thinking? Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Good night.